The headlights had been behind us for 20 minutes, matching every turn I made through the rain-slicked streets. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as I glanced at the rearview mirror again. Then at the man sitting in my passenger seat, the same man who'd made my teenage years hell. Ethan Blake shifted uncomfortably, his jaw clenched as he stared at the side mirror. "They're still there," he said quietly, his voice lacking its usual edge. I swallowed hard, my heart hammering against my ribs. Of all the nights to find my former bully standing alone in the rain, of all the stupid decisions to stop and offer him a ride, why did this have to be the one that ended with us being followed through the darkest part of town? 3 hours earlier, I'd been sitting in my apartment, mindlessly scrolling through my phone after another exhausting day at the architecture firm. The rain had started just after sunset, drumming against my windows in that hypnotic way that made you want to curl up with a book and forget the world existed. But I'd promised myself I'd pick up groceries, and I was the kind of person who kept promises, even the ones I made to myself. So I'd grabbed my jacket, headed down to my car, and driven toward the 24-hour market on the edge of our neighborhood. The streets were practically empty. Most sensible people already home and dry. I was stopped at a red light, watching the rain create rivers along the gutters when I saw him. At first, I didn't recognize the figure standing under the broken bus shelter, shoulders hunched against the downpour. But then the light changed, and my headlights swept across his face for just a moment. Ethan Blake. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step going downstairs. I should have driven past. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to keep going, to pretend I hadn't seen him. Ethan Blake had made my high school years a living nightmare. 4 years of being shoved into lockers, having my books knocked out of my hands, during cruel whispers and harsh laughter every time I walked down the hallway. He'd been the golden boy star quarterback, effortlessly popular, with that devastating smile that made everyone forgive his cruelty, and I'd been his favorite target. But 6 years had passed since graduation. I'd moved to the city, built a new life, surrounded myself with people who actually gave a damn about me. I'd even started to forget what it felt like to flinch when someone raised their voice or walked too close behind me. Therapy had helped. Time had helped more. And standing there in the rain, Ethan looked nothing like the arrogant teenager who'd ruled our high school with an iron fist and a sharp tongue. He looked lost, vulnerable, soaked through and shivering, staring down at his phone with an expression I'd never seen on his face before, something close to desperation. Before I could talk myself out of it, I pulled over to the curb and rolled down the passenger window. "Ethan." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Do you need a ride?" He looked up sharply, confusion flickering across his features before recognition dawned. For a long moment, he just stared at me through the rain, water streaming down his face, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. I saw something complicated move through his eyes. Surprise, shame, maybe even fear. Then he glanced down at his phone again, and whatever he saw there made his jaw tighten. "Carter," he said, my name sounding strange in his mouth after all these years. Yeah, I do." He climbed into my car, bringing the smell of rain and expensive cologne with him. Water dripped from his jacket onto my seats, but I didn't say anything. Up close, I could see how much he'd changed. The boyish arrogance had been replaced by something harder, more angular. He'd always been handsome in that all-American way, but now there was a weariness to his features that made him look older than 24. A fading bruise shadowed his left cheekbone, barely visible in the dim light. "Thanks," he muttered, not quite meeting my eyes. His hands were shaking as he buckled his seatbelt. My car broke down about a mile back, and my phone's almost dead. I was trying to call for a ride, but he trailed off, shaking his head. "Doesn't matter. I appreciate this, Carter. I know I'm probably the last person you want in your car." I didn't argue with that assessment. Instead, I pulled back into traffic, my mind racing. "Where do you need to go?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm against the rain, filling the silence between us. Ethan gave me an address on the north side of the city. Good 30-minute drive in this weather. We drove in awkward silence for the first few minutes. I could feel him watching me from the corner of my eye. and it took everything in me not to tense up the way I used to whenever he was nearby. But this wasn't high school anymore. I wasn't that scared, closeted kid anymore. I'd grown into myself, built a life I was proud of, come out to friends and family who loved me for exactly who I was. Ethan Blake couldn't hurt me anymore. "You look good," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. I glanced over at him, surprised. He was staring straight ahead through the windshield, his jaw working like he was forcing out words he'd practiced. "I mean, you look different, confident. It suits you." There was something raw in his voice, something that didn't sound like the casual cruelty I remembered. "Thanks," I said carefully. "You look different too." It was true, though. I wasn't sure if different was the same as good. He looked tired, worn down in a way that went deeper than just physical exhaustion. The bruise on his cheek was darker up close, and I noticed his knuckles were scraped raw. "What happened to your face?" His hand moved automatically to touch the bruise, then dropped back to his lap. "Nothing important," he said, too quickly. Then, after a pause, "I got into it with someone. My own fault." The way he said it made me think there was a lot more to that story, but I didn't push. We weren't friends. We were barely even acquaintances. I was just giving him a ride because leaving. Anyone stranded in weather like this felt wrong. That's when I first noticed the headlights behind us. A black SUV, keeping a consistent distance of about 3 car lengths. It shouldn't have registered as unusual we were on a main road. After all, but something about the way it moved made my shoulders tense. When I changed lanes to avoid a pothole, the SUV changed lanes too. When I turned right at the next intersection, taking a shortcut, I knew through a residential area. The SUV followed. Ethan noticed me checking the mirror and glanced back himself. His entire body went rigid. "Shit," he breathed, and the fear in that single word made my heart start racing. "Carter, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't panic, but we need to lose that car." "What?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror. "Ethan, what's going on?" "Who is that?" But even as I asked, I was pressing down harder on the accelerator, the engine humming as we picked up speed through the rain-slicked streets. "It's complicated," he said tightly. "Just can you lose them, please?" There was genuine desperation in his voice now. His hand had moved to the door handle like he was ready to bolt the second I stopped the car. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the way his chest was rising and falling too quickly. The way his eyes kept flicking to the side mirror with barely concealed panic. Every instinct told me to pull over, to demand answers, to let him deal with whatever mess he'd gotten himself into. But the fear in his eyes was real, and despite everything he'd done to me years ago, I couldn't just abandon him to whatever danger was following us. Maybe I was an idiot. Maybe old habits died hard and I was still that people-pleaser who couldn't stand to see anyone in pain, even someone who'd caused me so much of it. "Hold on," I muttered, and took a sharp left down a narrow side street. My little sedan handled better than the SUV in the tight spaces. I wound through the residential area, taking turns I barely remembered from my early days exploring the city. Left, right again, cutting through an alley that I prayed wasn't a dead end. Behind us, the SUV's headlights grew more distant, then disappeared around a corner. "There," Ethan said, pointing to a parking garage entrance. "Pull in there now." I didn't argue. I swung into the garage, took a ticket from the automated machine, and drove up to the 3rd level, where the shadows were thick and the overhead lights flickered weakly. I found a spot in the darkest corner and killed the engine, both of us sitting in sudden, deafening silence broken only by our harsh breathing and the distant patter of rain. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, making my heart pound so hard I could hear it in my ears. Beside me, Ethan had his head in his hands, his shoulders rising and falling with deep, measured breaths like he was trying to calm himself down. Minutes passed. The SUV didn't appear. "Are you going to tell me what the hell that was about?" I finally asked, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. "Who were those people? Why were they following you?" When Ethan didn't immediately answer, I turned in my seat to face him fully. "I just risked my life in my car to help you. The least you owe me is an explanation." He lifted his head slowly, and in the dim light of the parking garage, I saw something in his expression that I'd never seen before, genuine shame, mixed with a vulnerability that made him look almost fragile. "You're right," he said quietly. "You deserve to know. But Carter, once I tell you, you're going to want nothing to do with me." And I wouldn't blame you. "Try me," I said. My heart was still racing, but curiosity was winning out over fear now. Ethan Blake had always been a mystery to me, why he targeted me specifically. What drove his cruelty? What went on behind those cold blue eyes? Now, for the first time, I might actually get some answers. He took a deep breath, then started talking. "I'm in debt," he said bluntly. "Bad debt, to some very bad people. I made some stupid choices after high school, got involved in gambling. Thought I could make quick money to pay for college since my football scholarship fell through. Turned out I was terrible at it. Lost everything, then kept losing money I didn't have. Those people in that SUV, they're the ones I owe." I stared at him, processing this. It wasn't what I'd expected, though I wasn't sure what I had expected. "How much?" I asked. He named a figure that made me wince. "That was more than most people made in a year." "Jeez, Ethan, what were you thinking?" "I wasn't," he said with a bitter laugh. "That's kind of been my problem my whole life. I don't think. I just act, and then I deal with the consequences later." He rubbed his hands over his face. "That bruise you asked about? That was their first warning. Tonight was supposed to be the second. I was meeting with them to negotiate more time, but it went south. I managed to get away, but my car died." And he gestured vaguely at my car, at the situation we'd found ourselves in. "So now they're following you," I finished. "And by extension, following me." A cold fear settled in my stomach. "Ethan, you put me in danger? You got in my car knowing these people were after you?" Anger flared in my chest, hot and immediate. "I stopped to help you, and you, I know." He cut me off, his voice rough. "I know, and I'm sorry. Carter, I'm so fucking sorry. For tonight, for high school, for everything. You didn't deserve any of it." His eyes met mine, and I saw tears gathering there, making them shine in the low light. "You were always a good person, even when I was doing everything I could to make your life miserable. And here you are, years later, still being good, still helping even when you shouldn't." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the Ethan I remembered. Cocky, careless, cruel. This was someone broken down by circumstances, maybe finally understanding the weight of his own actions. But sympathy and understanding didn't change the fact that I was now potentially in danger because of him. "We can't stay here," I said, forcing myself to think practically. "They might circle back, check the parking garages. Gosh, where can you go that's safe?" Ethan shook his head helplessly. "I don't know. I've been staying in a shitty apartment downtown, but they know where I live. That's why I was trying to get to the north side. I have a buddy up there who said I could crash for a few days. I made a decision that I knew I'd probably regret. My place," I said, "is closer, and they don't know who I am or where I live. You can stay there tonight. Figure out your next move in the morning when it's safer." Even as I said it, alarm bells were ringing in my head. This was Ethan Blake, the person who'd made my teenage years hell. I should be dropping him off at a police station and washing my hands of this entire situation. But the look of relief and gratitude that crossed his face silenced my doubts, at least for the moment. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Carter, I can't ask you to do that. You've already done too much." I started the engine, checking the rearview mirror carefully before backing out of the parking spot. "You're not asking," I said. "I'm offering. But Ethan, once we get to my place, you're going to tell me everything. And I mean everything." The drive to my apartment was tense, both of us constantly checking mirrors and side streets for any sign of the black SUV. My neighborhood was quiet when we arrived, the rain finally starting to ease to a steady drizzle. I parked in my building's underground garage, and we hurried up to my third-floor apartment, not relaxing until the door was locked and bolted behind us. Ethan stood in my living room, looking completely out of place among my carefully curated space. I'd decorated with warm colors and comfortable furniture, built myself a home that felt safe and welcoming, the exact opposite of how I'd felt for most of high school. Seeing him there felt like two incompatible worlds colliding. "Bathrooms down the hall if you want to dry off," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'll make some coffee." While he was gone, I leaned against my kitchen counter and tried to process everything that had happened in the last hour. My hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. I couldn't quite believe I'd invited my high school bully into my home. But underneath the shock and fear, there was something else, a strange curiosity about who Ethan had become. What had happened to transform the golden boy into someone running from loan sharks? He emerged from the bathroom with his hair towel dried and his jacket off, wearing just a dark t-shirt that clung to his frame, without the layers and the rain. I could see how much his body had changed from the teenager I remembered. He'd always been athletic, but now he was broader, more filled out. And there was a tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve that I hadn't noticed before, some kind of geometric pattern that disappeared beneath the fabric. I handed him a mug of coffee. We sat down in my living room, me on the couch and him in the armchair across from me. The lamp cast warm light across the space, making everything feel almost normal, like we were just two old classmates catching up, instead of two people who'd just fled from dangerous men through the rainy streets. "Start from the beginning," I said, "and don't leave anything out." So he did. Ethan told me about how his life had fallen apart after high school, how he'd injured his knee, junior year of college, and lost his football scholarship. How he'd dropped out, unable to afford tuition, and drifted through a series of dead-end jobs. How he'd started gambling as a way to make extra money, then as a way to escape the crushing disappointment of being the golden boy who'd lost his shine. "I kept thinking I could win it back," he said, staring down into his coffee. "One more bet, one more game, and everything would turn around." But it never did. I just kept digging myself deeper. He'd borrowed money from the wrong people, a local operation that called themselves investors but were really just organized criminals. They'd been patient at first, but patience had run out months ago. "The guy whose money I owe, he's not someone you can negotiate with," Ethan continued. "I tried everything, payment plans, working for them, offering collateral. Nothing was good enough. They want their money, and they want it now, or—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The implications were clear. "Why didn't you go to the police?" I asked. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tell them what? That I borrowed money from loan sharks and can't pay it back? Best case scenario? Nothing happens, because I can't prove anything. Worst case, I sign my own death warrant because they find out I talked." He set his mug down on the coffee table. "I'm trapped, Carter. Completely and totally trapped." Silence settled between us, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. I should have felt vindicated, seeing the person who'd tormented me brought so low. But all I felt was a strange, uncomfortable empathy. "What about your family?" I asked. "Your parents?" Shook his head. "They barely have enough to support themselves in Arizona. My dad's on disability after his accident, and my mom works 2 jobs. I can't ask them for money they don't have. Besides, I haven't exactly been their golden child lately. We barely talk." "Friends?" I pressed. "That buddy on the north side?" Ethan's expression darkened. "Marcus? Yeah, we're friends, but not the kind who can loan me that kind of money. Most of the people I knew in high school moved away or moved on, the ones who stuck around. Let's just say I burned a lot of bridges over the years." The irony wasn't lost on me. Ethan Blake, who'd been surrounded by friends and admirers in high school, was now essentially alone, while I, the kid he'd tormented, had built a life full of genuine connections and support. Karma, maybe. Or just the way life worked out sometimes. "Why were you like that?" The question escaped before I could stop it. In high school, I mean. "Why did you go after me specifically? What did I ever do to you?" I'd wanted to ask that question for 6 years, but I'd never thought I'd get the chance. Now, sitting in my living room with my former bully, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him, the words just came out. Ethan's face went through several emotions: surprise, shame, something that might have been pain. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Then, finally, he spoke. "Because you were brave," he said quietly. "Because even though people whispered about you, even though you had to know what they were saying, you never hid who you were. You never pretended to be something you weren't. He looked up at me, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I was so jealous of that, he continued. I spent every day pretending, trying to be the person everyone expected me to be. The perfect athlete, the ladies' man, the guy who had everything figured out. And there you were, just being yourself? It made me angry, made me hate you for having the courage I didn't have. His voice cracked slightly. So, I made you pay for it. I made you pay for being everything I was too scared to be. The confession hung in the air between us, and suddenly so many things made sense. The way Ethan had always seemed to target me specifically, the particular cruelty in his words when he'd mocked me for being different, the way he'd laughed the hardest when his friends made jokes about my sexuality, as if he was trying to prove something to them more to himself. You're gay, I said. It wasn't a question. Ethan flinched like I'd slapped him, but he didn't deny it. Yeah, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I am. It took me until after high school to even admit it to myself, and even now, I haven't told anyone. My family doesn't know. Marcus doesn't know. You're literally the first person I've said it out loud to. He laughed bitterly. Guess it figures it would be you. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to rage at him, to tell him that his internalized homophobia didn't excuse the years of pain he'd caused me. But another part of me, the part that remembered what it was like to be scared and closeted and desperate to fit in, understood more than I wanted to admit. That must have been hard, I finally said, and I meant it. But Ethan, it doesn't make what you did okay. You hurt me badly for years. I know, he said immediately. God, Carter, I know. I've thought about it every day since graduation. All the things I said, the things I did, I can't take them back. I can't fix them. All I can do is tell you that I'm sorry and hope that maybe someday you can forgive me. Tears were sliding down his cheeks now, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. You didn't deserve any of it. You were just being yourself, and I punished you for it because I was too much of a coward to do the same. The anger I'd carried for so long started to crack, just a little. It didn't disappear as a pain couldn't be erased by one tearful confession, but it softened around the edges. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I can try to understand. I stood up, suddenly needing some distance. You can take the couch tonight. There are blankets in the closet. We'll figure out what to do about those men in the morning. I started to head toward my bedroom, but Ethan's voice stopped me. Carter. I turned back to look at him. He was standing now, too, looking lost and young, and nothing like the bully I remembered. Thank you, he said, for stopping tonight, for helping me, for listening. You didn't have to do any of it, and I know that. So thank you. Nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and retreated to my bedroom. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart racing again, but for different reasons now. Everything I thought I knew about Ethan Blake had been turned on its head in the span of a few hours. The arrogant bully was gone, replaced by someone broken and scared and desperately trying to survive. And the confession about his sexuality had opened up a whole new dimension to our shared history that I didn't quite know how to process. I changed into sleep clothes and climbed into bed. But sleep was impossible. My mind kept replaying the evening, the rain, the chase, the conversation, Ethan's tear-stained face as he confessed his internalized homophobia, the way he'd looked at me when I said I would try to understand. There was something shifting in the air between us, something that felt dangerous and complicated and impossible to define. Around 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep and padded quietly out to the kitchen for water. Ethan was still awake, lying on the couch and staring up at the ceiling. The blanket I had given him was tangled around his legs, and his t-shirt had ridden up slightly, exposing a strip of skin at his waist. Can't sleep either? I asked softly. He turned his head to look at me, and in the dim light filtering through the windows, his eyes looked dark and fathomless. Too much on my mind, he admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I see those headlights behind us. Or I think about what could have happened if you hadn't been so good at losing them. He sat up, the blanket falling away. You saved my life tonight, you know? If they'd caught up to us. Don't, I said, coming to sit on the far end of the couch. Don't think about what could have happened. We got away. You're safe. For tonight at least, you're safe. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and I found myself studying him in the low light. Without the rain and the fear and the adrenaline, I could see him more clearly. The way his hair fell across his forehead, the strong line of his jaw, the vulnerability in his eyes that made him look more human than I'd ever seen him. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said suddenly. I nodded. "When did you know? That you were gay, I mean? Was it always obvious to you?" It was a surprisingly personal question, but after everything we'd shared tonight, it didn't feel out of bounds. "I knew pretty early," I said. "Middle school, maybe. But I didn't accept it until high school. And I didn't start being open about it until after I moved to the city." "Was it scary?" he asked. "Coming out, I mean?" "Living openly. Thought about it." "Terrifying," I admitted. "But also freeing. Like I could finally breathe properly for the first time." "Yeah, some people didn't accept it. Some people I thought were friends turned out not to be. But the people who stayed, who loved me for who I really was, those relationships are stronger than anything I had when I was pretending." Ethan absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know if I'll ever be that brave," he said quietly. "I've spent so long hiding, I don't know how to be anything else." Without thinking, I reached out and placed my hand on his arm. The contact sent a small shock through me. I hadn't touched him since we were teenagers. And even then, it had only been when he was shoving me or knocking books out of my hands. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," I said. "It's being terrified and doing it anyway. You don't have to come out to anyone until you're ready. But Ethan, you deserve to live authentically. You deserve to be happy." His eyes met mine, and something passed between us, understanding, maybe, or recognition. The acknowledgement that we were more alike than either of us had ever realized. "How did you become so wise?" he asked with a small smile. I huffed a laugh. "Therapy," I said. "Lots and lots of therapy." He laughed too, and for a moment, the tension broke. We were just two guys sitting on a couch at 2 a.m, talking about life and identity and all the complicated things that came with being human, but then his smile faded, and he was looking at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I really am sorry, Carter," he said. "For everything? If I could go back and change it all, I would." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, and I felt another crack form in the wall I'd built around my old pain. "I know," I said softly. "I believe you." We stayed like that for a while, sitting close, but not quite touching. The silence between us no longer awkward, but almost comfortable. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and I stood to head back to bed. "Get some sleep," I told him. "We'll deal with everything else tomorrow." It's time when I walked away. I felt his eyes following me until I closed my bedroom door. The next morning dawned gray and overcast. The rain having passed but leaving behind a damp chill, I woke to the smell of coffee and found Ethan in my kitchen, making breakfast from whatever ingredients he could find in my poorly stocked fridge. "Hope you don't mind," he said when I appeared in the doorway. "I wanted to do something to thank you." We ate scrambled eggs and toast in comfortable silence, both of us avoiding the topic of what came next. But eventually we couldn't put it off any longer. "I need to figure out how to handle this debt," Ethan said, pushing his plate away. "I can't keep running forever, and I can't keep putting you in danger by staying here." "How much time do they typically give between warnings?" I asked carefully. He grimaced. "Usually a week, maybe 2. But I ran last night, which won't make them happy. They might escalate faster." An idea was forming in my mind, probably a stupid one, but I couldn't quite let it go. "What if you could earn the money legitimately?" I said. "I mean, it would take time, but if you had a plan, a real way to pay them back." "Carter, it would take me years to save that much money," Ethan said. "I'm barely making rent as it is." I pulled out my phone and started searching. What about debt consolidation? Or bankruptcy? There has to be some legal way out of this. We spent the next hour researching options, and while none of them were perfect, at least they were something. A bankruptcy attorney might be able to help, especially if Ethan could prove he was being threatened. "That's a long shot," I said, "but it might be worth trying." Ethan was looking at me with something like wonder. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Helping me, I mean. After everything I did to you, You should have left me in the rain last night. You should definitely have kicked me out this morning. But you're sitting here researching legal options for me? Like we're friends? Were we friends? I didn't know. But something had shifted between us in the last 12 hours. Something that made it impossible for me to see him as just my former bully anymore. Maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment, I said with a weak smile. Or maybe I believe people can change. You're not the same person you were in high school, Ethan. Neither am I. His eyes softened, and he reached across the table to take my hand. The touch was gentle, hesitant. Nothing like the rough shoves I remembered. I want to be better, he said. I want to be someone you don't have to make excuses for helping. Someone who deserves your kindness. My heart was beating too fast, and I pulled my hand back, suddenly needing distance. This was getting complicated in ways I hadn't anticipated. The next few days fell into a strange routine. Ethan stayed on my couch, too afraid to return to his apartment. He found a bankruptcy attorney willing to take his case and started the long process of legally dealing with his debt. Meanwhile, I went to work each day, came home to find him there. And we'd share dinner and conversation that grew easier each time. I learned things about him I never would have guessed. He was funny, with a dry wit that caught me off guard. He was surprisingly well-read, though he tried to hide it behind a self-deprecating attitude. He loved cooking and was much better at it than I was. And he was gentle in ways that contradicted everything I thought I knew about him, the way he carefully washed my dishes, the way he folded the blankets each morning, the way he asked permission before touching anything in my apartment, and I was learning something else. Something that scared me more than being chased through rain-slick streets. I was attracted to him. Not just physically, though, that was undeniable. He was objectively gorgeous, and living in close quarters made it hard to ignore. But I was attracted to this new version of Ethan, the one who was vulnerable and honest and trying so hard to be better, the one who laughed at my terrible jokes and listened intently when I talked about my work and looked at me sometimes like I was something precious. It was a Tuesday night. About a week after he'd first shown up in my car, when things shifted again, we were watching a movie, sitting on opposite ends of the couch like we always did, maintaining that careful distance. But then Ethan laughed at something on screen, and without thinking, he reached over and squeezed my knee. It was just a friendly gesture, nothing more. But it sent electricity through my entire body. He must have noticed my reaction, because he pulled his hand back immediately. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to, but I caught his wrist before he could retreat completely." "It's okay," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. Our eyes met, and the air between us suddenly felt charged with something dangerous and inevitable. "Carter," he said, my name sounding like a prayer or a warning. "I need to tell you something." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He turned to face me fully, his knee nearly touching mine on the couch cushion. "These past few days, being here with you, it's been the happiest I've been in years. Maybe ever. And I know it's fucked up considering our history. I know I have no right to feel this way. But I can't help it." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear him over the rush of blood in my ears. "Feel what way?" I asked, even though part of me already knew. "Like maybe I'm falling for you," he said quietly. "Like maybe I've been falling for you since that night in the rain, and I'm too far gone to stop now." Time seemed to slow down. Ethan Blake, the person who'd made my teenage years hell, who'd mocked me for being gay while hiding his own sexuality, was sitting on my couch telling me he had feelings for me. It should have been absurd. It should have made me angry. But instead, all I felt was a dangerous, impossible hope. "Ethan," I started, but I didn't know how to finish that sentence. He leaned closer. Close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes, could smell the familiar scent of my soap on his skin. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. "Tell me this is a bad idea, that I'm out of line, and I will. I'll leave tonight and never bother you again." But I didn't say any of those things. Instead, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of us afraid of breaking whatever fragile thing was forming between us. But then Ethan's hand came up to cup my face, and the kiss deepened, became something urgent and necessary. Years of pain, 1349, and longing and confusion seemed to pour out of both of us into that kiss. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "This is crazy," I whispered. "Completely insane." Ethan laughed, and it sounded shaky, but genuine. "Yeah," he agreed. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe crazy is what we need." We kissed again and again, until we were tangled together on the couch, hands exploring carefully, reverently. Every touch felt like an apology and a promise. Every kiss felt like healing and hope. Eventually, we moved to my bedroom, shedding clothes and a trail across the floor. What happened there was private, sacred, something that belonged only to us. But I will say that it was tender and passionate and completely overwhelming. And when we finally lay tangled together in my sheets, exhausted and sated, Ethan held me like I was something precious he was afraid of losing. "Thank you," he whispered into my hair, "for giving me a chance, for seeing me as more than what I was." I turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you for being brave enough to change," I replied. "For being honest with me and with yourself." We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. But of course, peace never lasts forever. I woke up to the sound of pounding on my apartment door. It was just after dawn, gray light filtering through my curtains. Beside me, Ethan sat up immediately, his face draining of color. "Shit," he breathed. "Carter, I'm so sorry. I thought we had more time." Pounding came again, harder this time, followed by a voice. "We know you're in there, Blake. Come out nice and easy, and nobody gets hurt." My heart was racing as I grabbed clothes and threw them on. Ethan did the same, his hands shaking. "The fire escape," I said quietly. "My bedroom window leads to it. You can get down to the alley, and I'm not running anymore," Ethan said firmly. "Carter, you've done too much for me already. I won't let you get hurt because of my mistakes." He took my face in his hands and kissed me, hard and desperate. "Go into the bathroom and lock the door. Don't come out no matter what you hear." "Ethan." "No," I started, but he cut me off. "Please," he said. "If something happens to you because of me, I'll never forgive myself. Let me handle this." The pounding came again, and I heard the distinct sound of someone trying to pick my lock. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him we'd face this together, but the fear in his eyes convinced me. I backed toward the bathroom, watching as Ethan squared his shoulders and moved toward the front door. From the bathroom, I heard muffled voices, then shouting. Something crashed furniture, maybe, or the lamp from my living room. My heart was in my throat as I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. I gave them my address, told them there were intruders, begged them to hurry. The operator kept me on the line, but I could barely focus on her words over the sounds coming from my living room. Then, suddenly, silence. Terrible. Absolute silence. I waited, counting seconds that felt like hours. Finally, I heard Ethan's voice. "Carter, it's okay. You can come out." I opened the bathroom door cautiously and found my living room in disarray, overturned furniture, broken glass from my coffee table, and 3 men in handcuffs, being held by 2 police officers who must have been nearby when my call came through. Ethan stood in the center of the chaos, breathing hard but unharmed. When he saw me, relief flooded his features. "You called the cops," he said. That was smart. I moved to his side, needing to touch him to make sure he was really okay. "Are you hurt?" I asked, running my hands over his arms, his chest, checking for injuries. "I'm fine," he assured me. They didn't even get a chance to do anything. The police showed up right after they broke in. The officers took our statements, arrested the 3 men on charges of breaking and entering, trespassing, and assault. With actual evidence and witnesses, Ethan's bankruptcy attorney would have even more ammunition to help him out of his situation. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. After the police left, and we'd filed all the necessary reports, Ethan and I sat among the wreckage of my living room. "I'll pay for all of this," he said, gesturing at the broken furniture. "Somehow, I'll make it right." I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. "We'll figure it out," I said. "Together." He looked at me with such raw emotion that it made my chest ache. "I don't deserve you," he said softly. After everything I've done, after the danger I brought to your door, you should hate me. Maybe I agreed. But I don't. I won't say I've forgiven everything. That's going to take time. But Ethan, I see who you're trying to become. And that person? That person I could maybe build something with. His eyes filled with tears, and he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. I promise I'll spend every day proving I'm worthy of this chance, he whispered. I'll be better. I'll be the person you deserve. The next few weeks were complicated. Ethan's bankruptcy case moved forward. And with the arrest of the men who'd been threatening him, he had concrete evidence of duress. It wasn't a quick process, but his attorney was optimistic. Meanwhile, Ethan found a job at a local restaurant, not glamorous, but honest work that he threw himself into. He moved into a small studio apartment closer to my place, giving us both some space while we figured out what we were to each other. We took things slow, dating like normal people rather than two individuals with years of complicated history between us. He took me to movies and cooked me dinner and made me laugh until my sides hurt. And slowly, carefully, I let him into my heart fully. We talked about high school, about the pain he'd caused and the pain he'd been in. It wasn't easy. There were moments when old wounds reopened and we had to work through them together. But there were also moments of pure joy. The first time he said I love you while we were walking through the park on a sunny afternoon. The first time I said it back, watching his face light up like I'd given him the greatest gift in the world. The first time we spent an entire weekend together and it felt completely natural. The first time he introduced me to his friend Marcus as his boyfriend, his voice proud and sure. 6 months after that rainy night when I'd picked him up, Ethan's bankruptcy was finalized. The debt was discharged, and while his credit would be damaged for years, was finally free from the threat that had been hanging over him. We celebrated at my apartment, just the two of us, with wine and takeout and the comfortable intimacy of two people who'd learned how to be together. I keep thinking about that night, Ethan said as we lay tangled together on my couch. How many things had to go exactly right for us to end up here? If you'd driven past me in the rain, if we'd been caught by those men, if I hadn't been brave enough to tell you how I felt. He pressed a kiss to my forehead. I don't believe in fate, but sometimes I wonder if the universe was giving me one last chance to get things right. I tilted my face up to look at him. And did you? I asked. Get things right? He smiled, and it was that genuine, unguarded smile I'd grown to love. I think I'm still working on it, he said. But having you here, being able to love you openly, that feels pretty damn right to me. I kissed him then, pouring all my own complicated feelings into it, the residual pain from our past, the joy of our present, the hope for our future. I love you, I said against his lips, even though you used to be an asshole. Even though this whole thing is weird and complicated and probably shouldn't work. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. I love you too, he said. Because you're stubborn enough to give an asshole like me a second chance. Because you're brave enough to let yourself be vulnerable. Because you're you, and I've never met anyone who makes me want to be better just by existing. We stayed like that for hours, talking about our plans and dreams. Ethan wanted to go back to school eventually, maybe study culinary arts since he'd discovered he loved cooking. I encouraged him, promised to support him however I could. He talked about coming out to his parents, about introducing them to me when he was ready. I told him about my goals of becoming a senior architect, about the building I was designing that might actually get built someday. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We still had work to do, both individually and together. Ethan was still working through his internalized homophobia and the guilt of his past actions. I was still learning how to trust him fully, how to believe that he wouldn't hurt me again. But we were committed to doing that work, to building something real and lasting from the wreckage of our shared past. 1 year after that rainy night, Ethan moved in with me. His lease was up, and it felt right to take that step together. We turned my second bedroom into a home office where I could do architectural work and he could plan menus and recipes. We adopted a cat from the local sheltora, scrappy orange tabby that Ethan named Karma because he said it was appropriate. We built a life together that was mundane and extraordinary all at once. We had our fights, of course. Moments when old wounds resurfaced and we had to navigate through pain and misunderstanding. but we also had countless moments of joy. Lazy Sunday mornings in bed, cooking together in our tiny kitchen, walking hand in hand through the city, no longer afraid to show the world who we were, building something real and solid and ours. Ethan did eventually come out to his parents. While it was difficult at first, they came around. They flew out to meet me, and his mother cried when she saw how happy Ethan was. "I've never seen him like this," she told me quietly, while Ethan and his father were outside. So settled. So content. Thank you for that. I'd wanted to tell her that Ethan had done it himself, that all I'd done was give him the space to become who he really was. But I just smiled and squeezed her hand. 2 years after that rainy night, Ethan proposed. It wasn't anything elaborate, just the two of us on my couch, where so much of our story had unfolded. He'd made me dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and then gotten down on one knee, right there in our living room. "I know I don't deserve you," he said, his voice shaking. "I know I did terrible things, and I can never fully make up for them. But Carter, you make me want to be better every single day. You make me believe in second chances, and redemption, and love. Will you marry me?" I said yes through tears, and he slipped a simple silver band onto my finger. We held each other and cried and laughed, and made plans for a small wedding with just our closest friends and family. Nothing fancy, nothing showy, just to people committing to love each other through whatever came next. It felt perfect in its simplicity. Looking back now, 3 years after that rainy night when I made the questionable decision to stop and help my former bully, I can honestly say it was the best questionable decision I ever made. Ethan is my partner, my best friend, the person I trust most in the world. He works as a sous chef now at a restaurant downtown, coming home each night smelling like garlic and wine and happiness. I made senior architect last year. My building design is finally under construction. We're planning our wedding for next spring. Something small and intimate, probably in a garden somewhere with just 50 guests. Marcus is going to be Ethan's best man. My best friend Riley is going to be mine. Ethan's parents are flying in from Arizona. My parents, who'd been worried when I first told them about dating my former bully, are now completely charmed by him and treat him like the son-in-law they'd always hoped for. Life isn't perfect. We still have bad days and difficult conversations. Ethan still sometimes wakes up from nightmares about those men who followed us, even though they're serving time now. I still sometimes flinch when someone raises their voice unexpectedly, a remnant from years of being bullied. But we work through it together, supporting each other through the difficult moments and celebrating each other's victories. Sometimes, I think about that 17-year-old kid I used to be, walking through high school hallways with his shoulders hunched, trying to be invisible. I wish I could tell him that it gets better, that the person who's hurting him is hurting too, and that one day, impossibly, miraculously, they'll help each other heal. I wish I could tell him that love comes from the strangest places sometimes, that second chances are real, that people can change, but mostly, I'm just grateful for every day I get with Ethan, for morning coffee and late-night conversations, for the way he looks at me like I'm his entire world, for the life we're building together, one day at a time, from the ashes of who we used to be into something beautiful and new. He's not the boy who bullied me anymore. I'm not the scared kid who let it happen. We're just us, Carter and Ethan. Two people who found each other in the rain and decided to weather every storm together. And that, I think, is the best kind of love story there is. The kind where people grow and change and fight for each other. The kind where redemption is possible and forgiveness is earned. The kind where a rainy night and a questionable decision lead to a lifetime of love. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but real and worth every moment of difficulty it took to get here. This is our story. I wouldn't change a single chapter of it, not even the painful ones, because without those painful chapters, we wouldn't be who we are now. And who we are now? That's everything I never knew I needed. So what do you think happened after we got engaged? Should I tell you about our wedding day and the surprise that waited for us there? If you want to hear the rest of our story, hit that subscribe button and drop a like on this video. Let me know in the comments, what would you do if your high school bully showed up in your life again? Could you give them a second chance like I did? Don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2 of our story. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next.